Most people think cancer begins the day a tumor is discovered, the day a scan lights up, the day a doctor sits across from you and says the word no one ever wants to hear. But the truth is far more unsettling. Long before a tumor forms, long before any symptom appears, tiny cancer cells may already be moving quietly through the bloodstream, invisible, undetectable, searching for a place to settle and grow. This process is called metastasis. And in modern oncology, metastasis is the event doctors fear the most, because in the majority of cancer cases, it is not the original tumor that takes lives, it is the spread. So here is the question researchers have been asking for years. What if the environment inside your body could make that spread harder? What if there were a daily habit that didn't cure cancer, didn't promise miracles, but changed the biological conditions that cancer cells rely on to survive? In recent laboratory studies, scientists placed circulating cancer cells into tiny artificial blood vessels and exposed them to different levels of blood flow. As the force of the flow increased, something remarkable happened. The cancer cells began to die, the same kind of powerful blood flow that happens when your heart is pounding during intense exercise. Now, this does not mean a workout can eliminate cancer, but it reveals something incredibly important. Exercise may change the internal landscape of your body in ways that make life much harder for cancer cells. And once you understand how this works, you may start looking at something as simple as movement very differently. Cancer is often imagined as a single moment, a diagnosis, a scan, a lump that suddenly appears where nothing existed before. But biology rarely works that way. In reality, cancer is usually a long, quiet process that unfolds over many years. Long before a tumor grows large enough to be detected, individual cancer cells may already be circulating through the body, traveling through the bloodstream like microscopic fugitives searching for a new place to settle. This is the stage scientists call metastasis. And metastasis is the part of cancer that doctors fear the most, because in the majority of cases, it is not the original tumor that becomes deadly. It is the moment when cancer cells leave their original site, move through the circulatory system, and establish new tumors in distant organs. Once that happens, treatment becomes dramatically more difficult. What makes this even more unsettling is that circulating tumor cells are surprisingly resilient. Many of them can survive the hostile conditions inside the bloodstream. They endure pressure, immune attacks, and mechanical stress while continuing to move through arteries and veins. Most people never realize this is happening. They assume cancer appears suddenly, but from a biological perspective, the body is constantly navigating a silent battle between abnormal cells trying to survive and the body's systems trying to eliminate them. So the real question becomes this: if metastasis depends on cancer cells surviving inside your circulation, what if the conditions inside that circulation could be made more hostile to them? What if the environment inside your blood vessels could make it harder for those cells to survive the journey? And this is where something surprisingly simple begins to enter the scientific conversation. Not a new drug, not a complicated medical treatment, but something far more familiar: movement. Louise Nicola, a neurophysiologist who studies how the brain and body adapt to stress, often explains this idea in a way that changes how people think about exercise. She points to a series of laboratory experiments published in journals such as PNAS and Nature Communications. In these studies, scientists created tiny artificial blood vessels inside microfluidic devices and placed circulating cancer cells inside them. The researchers then simulated different levels of blood flow, carefully adjusting the mechanical force acting on those cells. What they observed was striking. As the force of the flowing blood increased, the survival rate of circulating tumor cells dropped dramatically. The stronger the mechanical stress inside the vessel, the harder it became for those cells to stay alive. Scientists refer to this force as shear stress. It is the physical pressure created when blood moves rapidly along the walls of your blood vessels. And there is one situation where shear stress inside the human body increases significantly: intense physical exercise. Think about the moment when you are climbing a steep hill, sprinting, or pushing yourself on a stair machine at the gym. Your heart rate rises, your breathing becomes deeper and faster. Your cardiovascular system begins pumping blood through your body at a much higher speed than normal. In that state, the circulatory system becomes a powerful mechanical environment. But Louise Nicola is careful to emphasize something important. Exercise is not a cure for cancer. No responsible scientist would claim that running or lifting weights can eliminate metastasis. Biology simply does not work that way. What exercise does do, however, is change the internal conditions of the body. It alters blood flow, metabolism, immune activity, and hormonal signaling. And those are exactly the systems cancer must interact with in order to survive. To understand why something as ordinary as exercise could influence something as complex as cancer, we need to look at what is actually happening inside the body when you move. Because exercise is not simply about burning calories or building muscle. From a biological perspective, it is a powerful signal that reshapes multiple systems in the body at the same time. When you begin to exercise, your heart starts pumping faster, pushing blood through your arteries with greater force. Your muscles demand more oxygen and nutrients, forcing your circulation to accelerate. Your immune system begins mobilizing specialized cells into the bloodstream. Hormones that regulate growth and metabolism shift in response to the physical stress. In other words, movement creates a cascade of physiological changes that ripple through nearly every major system in your body. And those systems are the same systems cancer cells rely on to survive. Over the next few minutes, we are going to explore 4 of the most important mechanisms scientists believe are involved. First, we will look at how intense bursts of blood flow during exercise create mechanical forces inside your blood vessels that may make it harder for circulating tumor cells to survive. Second, we will explore how exercise mobilizes parts of your immune system that are specifically designed to detect and destroy abnormal cells before they have a chance to grow into tumors. Third, we will talk about metabolic signaling. Exercise changes the hormonal environment inside the body, lowering signals such as insulin and IGF-1 that cancer cells often depend on for growth. And finally, we will discuss something that surprises many people: the role of muscle itself. Research increasingly shows that people with greater muscle mass often have better long-term outcomes when facing serious diseases, including cancer. By the end of this discussion, you may begin to see exercise not just as a lifestyle habit, but as a repeated biological stress that gradually remodels the internal environment of your body. And that environment matters far more than most people realize. When scientists talk about the relationship between exercise and cancer, one of the first mechanisms they often discuss is something most people have never heard of before: mechanical stress inside the bloodstream. Your circulatory system is not just a set of passive pipes carrying blood. It is a dynamic environment where cells are constantly being pushed, pulled, and exposed to physical forces as blood flows through arteries and veins. Under normal resting conditions, blood moves at a relatively moderate speed. The pressure on cells traveling through that system is manageable. But during intense physical activity, something dramatic happens. Your heart rate rises rapidly. Cardiac output increases. Blood begins rushing through your circulatory system with far greater velocity than it does while sitting or resting. Scientists refer to the mechanical force created by this fast-moving blood as shear stress. Imagine a river after heavy rain. When the water moves slowly, leaves and debris can float along the surface without much disturbance. But when the current becomes powerful, the turbulence increases and fragile objects in the water are much more likely to break apart. Inside your bloodstream, a similar effect occurs. Circulating tumor cells, which are cancer cells that have detached from a primary tumor and entered the bloodstream, must survive this journey if they are going to establish new tumors elsewhere in the body. They need to withstand immune attacks, oxidative stress, and mechanical pressure as they travel through blood vessels. But laboratory studies suggest that these cells are surprisingly vulnerable to strong mechanical forces. In microfluidic experiments designed to simulate human blood vessels, researchers exposed cancer cells to increasing levels of shear stress. As the force of the simulated blood flow increased, the survival rate of those circulating tumor cells dropped significantly. And here is where exercise becomes interesting. During very intense physical activity, especially when your heart rate approaches what physiologists call zone 5, roughly 90% of your maximum heart rate, blood flow through your body accelerates dramatically. You may recognize this state from experience. It is the moment during a workout when your breathing becomes heavy, your heart is pounding, and you feel as if your entire cardiovascular system is working at full capacity. At that moment, the forces inside your blood vessels are far stronger than they are during normal daily movement. Now, this does not mean a few minutes on a treadmill will eliminate cancer cells. The human body is far more complex than that. But it does introduce a compelling biological idea. Repeated bursts of increased blood flow may create a circulatory environment that is less forgiving for tumor cells trying to survive in the bloodstream. In other words, intense movement may periodically turn your circulatory system into a place where those fragile cells struggle to endure the journey. If the mechanical forces created by exercise affect the environment inside your bloodstream, the second mechanism may be even more important: the effect exercise has on your immune system. Your immune system is constantly performing surveillance. Every day, billions of cells divide inside your body, and occasionally some of them become abnormal. When that happens, specialized immune cells are designed to recognize the problem and eliminate those cells before they have the chance to multiply. Two of the most important players in this process are natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells. Natural killer cells, often called NK cells, act as rapid response defenders. They are able to detect cells that look abnormal or stressed and destroy them quickly. Cytotoxic T cells, on the other hand, are more targeted. Once they recognize a specific abnormal cell, they can attack and eliminate it with remarkable precision. What many people do not realize is that exercise dramatically changes how these immune cells move throughout the body. When you begin exercising, your body releases stress hormones such as epinephrine and norepinephrine. These hormones signal immune cells that are normally resting in tissues like the spleen, lungs, and bone marrow to mobilize into the bloodstream. Within minutes of starting physical activity, the number of circulating immune cells can increase significantly. Think of it like opening the doors of a fire station during an emergency. Firefighters who were previously inside the building suddenly move out into the streets where they can respond more quickly to potential problems. Exercise appears to do something similar for your immune system. During and shortly after physical activity, natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells circulate through the body at much higher levels than usual. This increased circulation improves the chances that these immune cells will encounter abnormal cells, including cancer cells that may be present in tissues or moving through the bloodstream. Animal studies have shown something particularly interesting. In several experimental models, regular exercise increased the infiltration of immune cells directly into tumor tissue. In other words, the immune system did not simply circulate more cells through the blood. It also appeared to send more of them into the very areas where tumors were growing. Human studies are more complex, and researchers are still working to understand the full picture. But the core concept remains clear. Exercise repeatedly activates and redistributes immune function. And because immune surveillance plays a central role in suppressing malignant cells, anything that strengthens or mobilizes that surveillance may help the body maintain control over abnormal cell growth. The third mechanism connecting exercise and cancer involves something less visible than blood flow or immune cells, but just as powerful: the metabolic signals that circulate through your body every day. Every time you eat, your body releases hormones that help regulate how nutrients are used and stored. One of the most important of these hormones is insulin. Insulin allows cells to absorb glucose from the bloodstream and convert it into energy. But insulin does more than regulate blood sugar. It is also a growth signal. In many biological systems, insulin and a related hormone called insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1, tell cells that conditions are favorable for growth and division. Under normal circumstances, this is essential. Your body needs those signals for tissue repair, muscle growth, and healthy cellular turnover. The problem arises when those signals remain elevated for long periods of time. Chronically high insulin and IGF-1 levels can create an environment that encourages rapid cell division, and cancer cells, like all cells, respond to those signals. This is why researchers studying cancer metabolism often focus on conditions such as insulin resistance, obesity, and chronic metabolic dysfunction. These states can produce a hormonal environment that unintentionally supports the growth of malignant cells. Exercise directly influences this system. When you move your body regularly, your muscles become more sensitive to insulin. This means your cells require less insulin to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. Over time, regular physical activity lowers baseline insulin levels and improves the efficiency of your metabolic system. Exercise also affects inflammation, another critical component of the metabolic environment. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now recognized as a key factor in many diseases, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and several types of cancer. Inflammatory molecules circulating through the body can influence how cells grow, repair themselves, and communicate with surrounding tissues. Regular physical activity has repeatedly been shown to reduce markers of chronic inflammation. It improves glucose regulation, supports healthier body composition, and shifts metabolic signaling toward a more stable state. None of these changes eliminate cancer risk entirely, but they influence the biological conditions that cancer cells must operate within. And when the metabolic environment becomes less supportive of uncontrolled growth, abnormal cells often face a much harder path forward. The fourth mechanism is one that many people overlook when they think about health and disease, but it has become increasingly important in modern medical research: the role of muscle. For many years, muscle was viewed primarily as something related to strength and physical appearance. It was something athletes cared about, something people associated with fitness or aging, but not something that would influence serious diseases like cancer. That understanding has changed dramatically. Today, scientists recognize skeletal muscle as a powerful metabolic organ that plays a central role in regulating the body's physiology. Muscle tissue helps control glucose metabolism, influences inflammation, produces signaling molecules called myokines, and interacts with the immune and endocrine systems in ways researchers are still discovering. Because of this, the amount of muscle a person has can significantly affect how their body responds to illness. In cancer medicine, this has become especially clear. Large imaging-based prognostic studies have shown that patients with low muscle mass, a condition often called sarcopenia, tend to have worse outcomes across many types of cancer. These patients are more likely to experience complications during treatment, have a harder time tolerating chemotherapy, and often face greater declines in physical function. One reason is that cancer treatment itself places enormous stress on the body. Chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery can all push the body into a state of physiological depletion. When a patient begins treatment with very little muscle reserve, the body has fewer resources available to withstand that stress. Muscle also helps regulate metabolism during illness. It stores amino acids that can be used for tissue repair and immune function, and it plays a role in maintaining energy balance during periods of physical strain. This is why oncologists increasingly pay attention not only to body weight, but to body composition. Two patients can weigh the same amount, yet the one with greater muscle mass often has a much better physiological reserve. Exercise becomes critical in this context. Resistance training and regular physical activity help preserve and rebuild muscle tissue. For cancer survivors in particular, regaining muscle strength after treatment can significantly improve physical function, independence, and overall quality of life. In other words, muscle is not just about strength. It is a biological resource that supports the body during some of its most difficult battles. When researchers step back and look at all of these mechanisms together, blood flow, immune surveillance, metabolic signaling, and muscle physiology, a broader pattern begins to emerge. Exercise does not act on just one part of the body. It acts across multiple systems simultaneously. And those systems happen to be the same ones that cancer interacts with throughout its entire life cycle. Because cancer is not a single event, it is a process that unfolds over time, moving through several stages. First, there is the initial transformation of a normal cell into an abnormal one. Then comes the slow growth of a primary tumor. After that, in some cases, cells break away and travel through the bloodstream, attempting to establish new tumors in distant organs. Each stage depends on biological conditions within the body. And this is where exercise becomes increasingly important. Large observational studies have shown that people who maintain regular physical activity often have lower risk for certain cancers, particularly colon and breast cancer. The exact reasons are still being studied, but the mechanisms we have discussed, improved metabolism, reduced inflammation, and enhanced immune surveillance, likely play important roles. But the influence of exercise does not end once a diagnosis occurs. In patients undergoing treatment, exercise is now widely recognized as a powerful supportive intervention. Cancer therapies can be physically demanding, often causing fatigue, muscle loss, and reduced cardiovascular capacity. Carefully supervised exercise programs have been shown to help patients maintain physical function, tolerate treatment more effectively, and recover more quickly afterward. For cancer survivors, the role of exercise shifts once again. After treatment ends, many individuals face a period of rebuilding. The body may have lost strength, endurance, and metabolic resilience during months of therapy. Gradually restoring those capacities through movement can help rebuild what physicians often call physiological reserve, the body's ability to respond to stress and maintain stability. Because of this growing body of evidence, exercise has moved from being seen as a simple lifestyle recommendation to something much more significant. In modern oncology, it is increasingly described as a pillar of care, supporting the body before, during, and after the cancer journey. Understanding the science behind exercise in cancer is important, but eventually the question becomes practical. What does this actually mean for someone listening to this conversation in real life? The answer depends on where you are in your health journey, because the role of exercise changes slightly depending on the situation. For someone thinking about prevention, the strongest evidence consistently points toward meeting general public health guidelines for physical activity. Most major health organizations recommend a combination of moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise along with regular resistance training. Aerobic activity improves cardiovascular capacity and helps regulate metabolic signaling throughout the body. Resistance training, on the other hand, helps maintain and build muscle mass, which supports metabolic health and immune function. Both of these adaptations appear to contribute to a biological environment that is less favorable for cancer development. But what about someone who is already undergoing cancer treatment? In that situation, the goal of exercise changes. The objective is no longer performance or pushing physical limits. Instead, the focus becomes preservation, preserving muscle, preserving mobility, preserving sleep quality and mood, and most importantly, preserving the body's ability to complete treatment successfully. Even light or moderate movement during treatment, when guided appropriately by medical professionals, can help reduce fatigue and maintain physical function during what is often a very challenging period. For cancer survivors, the emphasis shifts once again. After treatment, many individuals face a period of rebuilding. Months of therapy may leave the body depleted, with reduced strength, endurance, and metabolic stability. Gradually returning to regular exercise can help restore muscle mass, improve aerobic capacity, and rebuild what physicians often call the body's physiological reserve. And this leads to a final way of thinking about exercise that captures the science behind all of it. Exercise does not work because it motivates you. It works because it repeatedly places controlled stress on the body, stress that gradually reshapes metabolism, strengthens immune function, improves circulation, and rebuilds muscle. Those are the very systems cancer interacts with at every stage of its development. There is something quietly powerful about the way the human body adapts to movement. Every time you walk, lift, cycle, or climb a set of stairs, your body interprets that effort as information. Your heart adjusts, your muscles respond, your immune system shifts its activity. Hormones change, circulation improves, and countless small biological signals begin moving through the body. None of these changes feel dramatic in the moment. You may finish a workout and simply feel a little tired, maybe slightly out of breath, but beneath the surface, something much deeper is happening. Your body is constantly remodeling itself in response to that repeated stress. Cells are replaced. Systems become more efficient. The body becomes more capable of handling the challenges placed in front of it. This is why exercise is so often misunderstood. It is not just about burning calories or maintaining a certain weight. It is about gradually shaping the internal environment in which every cell in your body must live. And over time, those small adaptations accumulate. They strengthen circulation, they sharpen immune surveillance, they stabilize metabolic signaling, they rebuild muscle that supports resilience. In ways that are almost invisible day to day, movement slowly helps the body become stronger, more adaptable, and better prepared for whatever challenges may come.